I think Sofia Coppola has just made her best film in 20 years. Hi, it's Brian. This is the awards contender, and in today's video, I'm giving you my spoiler-free review of Sofia Coppola's Priscilla, starring Kaylee Spaney and Jacob Elordi. So I feel like I've talked about this on the channel before. Elvis was not one of my favorite films last year. In fact, it was my least favorite of the 10 Best Picture nominees. I liked it enough. It was fine. I thought the Austin Butler performance was excellent. I had no qualms with that Oscar nomination, like the wins he had throughout the season. That was cool. But I really hated the Tom Hanks performance and character, and the way at times that just took over the movie. A lot of the flashy Baz Luhrmann cinematography and editing I thought sometimes got in the way of a compelling story. And so yeah, it was fine. I didn't dislike the film, but when I heard we had a new Elvis film written and directed by Sofia Coppola coming that was going to focus on Priscilla Presley, I got very excited. I thought, okay, this might actually be an Elvis Presley movie that really gets deeply involved in the story between these two fascinating people. And when I went to go see this film on Sunday, I had very high hopes. All the critics I look up to really liked or loved this movie. And although it has been for me a while since I really loved a Sofia Coppola film, I don't know, I just felt like her aesthetics with this story were going to blend together very well. The trailer had me intrigued. The casting, Kaylee Spaney winning Best Actress at Venice. Jacob Elordi is having a moment right now. I love his performance in Saltburn, another film written and directed by a woman, Emerald Fennell. It is my second favorite film of the year behind Past Lives. So I was perfectly happy to see this guy in another movie. And basically I knew within about 5 to 10 minutes I was going to adore Priscilla. Like just the confidence right off the bat. Putting us in a place and time that feels so authentic. It pops off the screen, 1959, West Germany, where Priscilla's father is stationed for work. And Elvis Presley is there too. He is, I guess, about 24 years old at the time when he first meets 14-year-old Priscilla. Now, I knew a little bit about the relationship between Elvis and Priscilla, but this movie really opened my eyes to like how much of a creep Elvis Presley was, like that he was even kissing this young girl. Like she was 14. She was a freshman in high school. And it's like in the opening 10 minutes, you're like, oh God, what is happening here? But all along the way, while Elvis continues being a creep, like you can understand her infatuation with him. When she first meets Elvis Presley, he's already a big star. He's a big music star. He's been in movies. And so she's just kind of smitten with him like any high school girl would be for this like tall, hunky celebrity. That makes sense. And basically when he sets his eyes on her, she suddenly feels very special and she's going to do anything she can to spend more time with him. I mean, this was a different time. Like the end of the 50s into the 60s, like adult men preying on young girls as icky as the subject is. I mean, it's a true story. Like this actually happened. It's based on Priscilla Presley's memoir, which I believe is called Elvis and Me. So we're coming from a place based in truth. I don't know how much of what we see in the film Priscilla actually happened. I mean, it is a movie. But I feel like this is probably the closest we've seen to an authentically true story of the relationship between Priscilla and Elvis. Their relationship is only examined a little bit in the Baz Luhrmann film from last year, but in this movie, almost every scene is from Priscilla's perspective. This is her story, and I loved that about this movie. Telling yet another Elvis story would have been kind of dull, but we haven't really examined him from the perspective of a young Priscilla Presley, and that was very exciting to me. And so just on that level, I was intrigued from the first scene. And then as the movie progresses, it just gets more and more interesting. It's so intimate. We don't get a lot of like flashy scenes of Elvis performing, acting in movies with all these beautiful leading ladies. Like we hear about it. He talks about it with Priscilla when he comes home, But I love that we didn't just get the standard scenes you would expect to see in this movie. Like, because we're almost always with Priscilla, and I guess she didn't really go with him very often to his musical acts, to the production sets of his films. Like, she often stayed home in her little prison that sometimes she's happy in, and other times she's sad, she's missing him, she's reading in the paper that he might be having another affair with one of his leading ladies, and she's just like sipping coffee and she's kind of rolling her eyes like, oh, here's another one. Like, this is a unique perspective into the Elvis Presley world that we haven't really seen before. And to have someone as gifted as Sofia Coppola writing the script, directing the film, like, you're in very good hands. Even in her lesser work, and there are a couple of movies she's made I'm not a big fan of, like, Sofia Coppola always leaves a mark on every story she tells. Like, you know it's her at all times. There's something about her aesthetics, the way she uses color, the way she frames her shots, the wide shots, the close-ups, the beautiful soundtrack she always incorporates into her movies to tell her stories. Like, everything she's really good at is up front and center here. She uses her voice as a filmmaker so beautifully all the way through. And while watching this movie, it just felt like Sofia Coppola was in the zone. Like, she knows what she's doing here. She knows what kind of story she wants to tell, and she has done a tremendous job. I really hope she gets into Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars. I do think she deserves some recognition for this amazing screenplay. She deserves recognition for how subtle this story can be at times, how restrained. Again, she could have tried to make this bigger and have more of Elvis Presley in it, and I liked how we pull back from that and focus mainly on Priscilla. I mean, part of it might have been budgetary constraints. I know Baz Luhrmann's film was like, $100 million budget, maybe more. And I'm sure the budget for Priscilla was probably very low, so there was only so much she could do anyway. But I think the low budget for this movie is in part what makes it so much more successful of an experience than Elvis, because we're not just throwing everything at the audience, because we are zeroing in specifically on two people in a relationship that starts at the very end of the 1950s and goes all the way to the mid-1970s in a 2-hour movie. We don't have time to be going all over the place. Sofia Coppola rightly just shows us all the important moments of this relationship, and it's fascinating. I could have watched this movie for another hour. I was totally wrapped up in the performances, in the art direction, in the joy and the pain and the regret of the Priscilla Presley character. Kaylee Spaney is a star. She is magnetic in this movie. Again, restraint. This is a performance that could have gone very big and bold and over the top and melodramatic. Kaylee Spaney kind of reins it in. A lot of the great acting she does in this movie is without words. It's the way she looks at Elvis. We know just from a glance that she gives him from down the hallway or across the room what she's thinking and feeling. And yes, the physical transformation of Kaylee Spaney in Priscilla is impressive. We meet her when she is 14 years old, and she looks 14 years old. Like, she looks like a child. Like, when she tells Elvis that she is in 9th grade and he's like, whoa, you're just a kid. Like, yeah, she is just a kid. Like, back off. Like, she's so young, but she's full of dreams and clearly smitten with him and wants to be with him even from a very young age. And he's not pushing against it. He's like, okay. And then she continues to age all the way till I want to say like 29, 30 by the very end of the movie. And you buy into it every step of the way. There's a moment when some time has passed and Priscilla is now like in her late 20s. And I didn't even recognize Kaylee Spaney. Like, she has this tan, she has a different haircut. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the same actress. She looks like she's in her late 20s now. And so what they did physically with her throughout this movie is pretty great, but none of that matters if the emotional transformation doesn't ring true. and it does. Like, you really get the sense of her childlike wonder in the first act, and then how she's already kind of growing up, leaving her parents, pursuing this man of her dreams, and of course they get married, and they have a child, Lisa Marie Presley. And as all of these things are happening, she's becoming an adult very quickly. She's recognizing that she's probably not in the best relationship. We see a side to Elvis Presley you don't typically see in the movies. Like, he is awful to her in moments here. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's just something kind of nasty he says to her, storming out of a room and making her pack her bags and leave. And like, he is kind of off his rocker sometimes, but it's Jacob Elordi as Elvis, and he is so charismatic. He is beautiful. He plays the most handsome douchebag in the movies right now, because with this film and with Saltburn, Jacob Elordi has mastered the hot douchebag. This is a guy you are just pulled to no matter what. Like the scene in Priscilla when he gets out of the swimming pool and he's climbing on top of her and he's like smiling and being super cute. I was just like this in the theater. I was like, I feel like he was perfect casting for both Priscilla and Saltburn, because even when he's doing questionable things, he's not the greatest guy in the world. You understand why Oliver in Saltburn and why Priscilla in Priscilla are so taken with him. His charm, his charisma, it just oozes off the screen. I think Elordi is going to have a very nice long career in film and TV. He's a great actor. He has proven now with 2 films this fall that he can be really, really, really good. Now, like, is this a better performance than Austin Butler gives in Elvis? It's hard to compare the two. They're very different films, and like how Austin Butler plays the role in Elvis would not have worked in Priscilla, and vice versa. I don't think Jacob Elordi would have been very successful as Elvis in the Baz Luhrmann film. Like, he's much more relaxed of a performer, I would say, in Priscilla. He's kind of inhabiting Elvis's essence. He doesn't disappear into the role as much as I would say Austin Butler did in Elvis. Because we're seeing the story through her eyes, like, the essence is enough, and I think he does what this role requires him to do. He is great in this. I loved all the text here, the art direction, the cinematography, the score, the soundtrack. Like, this movie at times is just completely blissful. Like, there's a shot of Priscilla walking down a hallway at school. The song chosen for the soundtrack in that moment, the way she's smiling and moving almost in slow motion as the other students are walking past her. That's a great moment. The recreation of their home is flawless. The estate, the grounds outside the home, people standing outside the gate, like hoping they can catch a glimpse of Elvis. And she's like out on the lawn petting a dog and just minding her business, and sometimes enjoying the quietness when Elvis is out and about. Like, one thing this movie needed to get right was the period detail, the costumes, the settings, all of that detail to make it feel believable. We're in the late 50s or mid 60s or early 70s. That is all fantastic. And it's just a terrific film. It's always compelling. If you have any interest in the story of Elvis and Priscilla, like, you can't go wrong here. Like, to see the creepy way that relationship began and how he treats her throughout the years. Sometimes there's physical abuse, emotional abuse, but he can also have this really sweet side, so you understand why she stayed with him for as long as she did. Like, all of the little touches throughout Priscilla, I very much admired, and I was just like, okay. I've been underwhelmed by some of the other Sofia Coppola films as of late, but that was not the case with Priscilla. I would say for me, there were just 2 issues I had with it, and they're both pretty minor. The first one was, as I said, I would have liked this movie to be longer. There are many scenes throughout Priscilla. I want to say there's at least 10 to 12, maybe more, where I feel like the scenes could go on a little longer. There are scenes in this movie where I feel like we're just starting to get going, and then we cut to another scene. And I'm like, oh, no, go back to that one. I was interested in that one. Like, maybe Coppola's philosophy here was less is more, leave the audience wanting more. And I understand that, but there is the occasional scene that will last for like maybe 45 seconds or a minute. And I'm like, let's let this breathe a little bit. Give me some more behavior from Priscilla. I felt this way in not just one moment, it was a bunch. I was like, slow it down a little bit. Let's take some time here. I do think Priscilla could have been an extra 10 to 20 minutes. I think that extra length would have enhanced the film, because that takes me to my other issue with the movie, and that is, in some ways, the third act of the film, very much so the last scene. I have to be honest, when the movie cut to black and the end credits, I went, oh, that's it? Like, I felt like there was more. I felt like, oh, we were going to get another few scenes, not necessarily just like text on the screen saying what happened next. We can all just read up on that online. But where we leave the characters, it felt a little bit clunky. It felt a little bit anticlimactic. I was like, oh. I mean, it seemed to me almost too obvious of a place to end the film. Like, I would have liked at least an epilogue scene, a moment with Lisa Marie Presley, who's like a little girl, towards the end of the film. Where we leave the characters, it's fine, but I did kind of shrug when the whole thing was over, and that's not a good thing to feel in a movie that's this good. Like, I wanted this film to stick the landing and be emotional, have you like cheering for Priscilla, or just feeling something big, the way you do at the end of Lost in Translation, my favorite Sofia Coppola movie. But overall, this is a terrific film you should absolutely go see in a theater. I also very much admire Marie Antoinette and the Bling Ring, but I would still rank Priscilla just a little bit higher. I think this film in so many ways is exquisite. I love the performances. Jacob Elordi is great in this, and especially Kaylee Spaney. Like, even though it's not a big emotional performance, I think the restraint is what makes that turn so memorable, so effective. I do think Kaylee Spaney has a shot of getting an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. She's probably hovering around like 6th or 7th place right now, as I'll talk about in my upcoming Best Actress Oscar predictions video. But she's really something in this movie. I very much look forward to what she does next. She is a spellbinding talent. And Sofia Coppola, what can I say? She is such a gifted artist. I have liked or loved almost everything she's made, going back to the Virgin Suicides. And I do think Priscilla, her latest film, is her best in 2 decades since Lost in Translation. I give Priscilla an 8 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of Priscilla. Do you think Kaylee Spaney will be able to get an Oscar nomination for Best Actress? We'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.